Welcome. Allow me to share some tips for powerful negotiations and helping you to get that contract you really want.
My name is Schoeman Law. I'm an attorney, conveyancer, notary public, and mediator. I'm also a legal project practitioner. It is my absolute pleasure to be presenting to you today. In today's session, we are going to be looking at the topic of negotiation from both sides of the table. This means that we'll be looking at it from a client or an engagement of a client point of view, as well as the engagement of a supplier point of view. So let us unpack some of the major elements to consider. Why? Because following on from this, we need to establish what the negotiation environment looks like. Now, what I mean by that is most of us think in an ideal world, this is the price and these are the terms that I would want to have or give. In a less ideal world, which we live in, we then get pushed back. And we need to know before we start the conversation, where is your maximum threshold? What is your point that you cannot go below? Now, that point of your absolute minimum and your perfect world scenario, somewhere in between, the negotiation takes place. So it is important for you to know exactly what is it going to take practically to get this done. What does the timeline look like? What happens if there's a delay? Can we absorb that? Can we plan around it? Can we insure against it? What happens to the cost? What are the risks I can foresee at this point already that can take my realistic point or the lowest point of my negotiation scale, if it were, against my ideal world view of where this should be? What is going to tip the scales to whichever point or even below the bare minimum I can go? And how do I avoid that? So it's critical that you walk in with a very clear mind, practically broken it down into bite-sized chunks. What needs to happen? Who needs to do it? What is it going to cost? When is it going to happen? And what happens if anything deviates this? What are the financial impacts and business impacts? So once you have that, it's critical because it informs what are my goals? What do I want? What are my priorities? What are the priorities and the goals potentially of the other side of the negotiation table? Are there points that we can compromise on or trade off and say, for example, I can sell you this car at 100,000 Rand. You'll then push back and say, sure, I would like to buy this car, but not for 100,000 Rand. I'm willing to pay 85,000 Rand in 4 installments. And I want you to go and register the vehicle onto my name. Then, of course, the pushback could also be, no, I can't accept 85,000. I can accept 90, 4 installments with interest, and I will then proceed to register it in your name. And of course, that's the back and forth that happens. So in our example, you'll see that the contracting zone is somewhere between the seller's aspiration, in this case it's a 30,000 Rand example, and the buyer's aspiration, which is 20,000. So they've got almost a worlds apart view of this is my perfect world scenario and this is your perfect world scenario. So that's what we call the theory of the aspiration base versus the real base. And essentially, the real base, which the seller is willing to sell at is 23,000, and what the buyer is really willing to pay, or that's really that's stretching it. That's that other uncomfortable side of things. Between those two is where the negotiation is actually going to take place. And it's very important to notice this, because it allows you to prepare and to think in a way that you are prepared for this, and that this does not surprise you. So when someone starts off with a number, the point being here that sellers always start off high and they work towards a lower number. And of course, buyers start low and they're willing to work their way up to a higher number. And somewhere in the middle of the higher and the lower numbers, respectively, is where the agreement is going to take place. Now, another component to look at is, of course, it goes without saying, the analysis of the situation, the relationship component. Is this a scenario where we want to reach a point where everyone wins? Everyone walks out happy. Perhaps our car selling scenario is a good example of that. Is this a relationship that will continue? In other words, is it important to ensure that the relationship remains intact for future business purposes, or are we looking at a once-off deal never to happen again? Who is acting on either side? Now, this is particularly when a negotiation is on the edge of becoming acrimonious or already has. Then people are represented by elders, family members, for example, church members, or even attorneys and advocates. And it's important for you to then know, who is this person speaking on behalf of? Less acrimoniously, is this person authorized to negotiate with me on behalf of this company, for example? So, although we mostly refer to it in a setting where the wheels have started to come off from a dispute situation point of view, it could also be, who's this individual? What's their background? What's their qualification? Etc. When it comes to the representative or the authorized representative of a business. You need to know exactly what you want to achieve in the first round. Now, we often joke as Cape Townians that if you want to do business in Cape Town, it's a very long, extended sales lead cycle. Why? Because you'll meet someone, then perhaps you'll go for a coffee, then perhaps you'll go for a lunch, then perhaps you'll speak on the phone a couple of times. And this was before COVID, by the way. And it's a long process. So be clear if perhaps that's a scenario you are dealing with. What do you want to walk out with or achieve by the end of the first round? What happens if we can't make a deal? What happens if we can't reach a settlement? What's the worst that can happen? And that's important because it helps you weigh up and it helps you realize what you can trade off with and what you can't. So how do we get to consensus or common ground? Well, it depends on who we are talking about, the relationship between the parties. Is there an established degree of trust between them? Do they know each other? Have they transacted earlier, previously? What are the needs? And what are the fears? Remember, the fears manifest themselves as issues. Now, how do you establish needs and fears or issues, particularly those subtle ones we were talking about in our previous slide? Well, you can make a positive statement or you can receive one. In other words, someone can tell you, you know what, in my life, financial security has been the most important focus for me and I'm so glad I've achieved it. Then you can hear that that is something quite important to that person. And sometimes we have these discussions before we start talking business, And we think that they are such useful, well, I think they are useful interactions, but actually what I meant to say is that we often think they are such useless exercises. It's just a bunch of chitter chatter, and it's really, let's just get to the business. The point is, it's important for you to have those initial informal interactions in order to gauge, even before you start delving into it. So you can ask questions in a number of ways, but the purpose of why you're asking the question, the underlying objective needs to be clear. Are you wanting to get attention? Now, what I mean by getting attention is, do you want the question to grab that person's attention and make them present? Perhaps you feel, or your intuition or your experience of the environment or interactions is such that this person is multitasking and distracted. So you could ask a question to get their attention. You can ask a question to get information. And we do this casually. So what do you do? What do you do for a living? Do you have any children? Are you married? How old are they? We ask all these questions in order to gauge and to get perspective, and not to lose sight of the fact that although in negotiating business, we are still human. And it's important for us to appreciate that in order to identify needs and fears, because ultimately that will impact us. Of course, you could also give information. You can volunteer it. And then once you have, you can ask a question to get information, to stimulate thinking. So often we say, especially if it's a difficult discussion that needs to be had, a very well-known style is to ask questions to change the person's thinking or perception around a particular topic, so that you can get them to reassess their own points of view or opinions on a particular matter. Or you can check your conclusion to say, oh, okay, so you're married and you've got 3 children and they're all going to school there, and it's wonderful how you've managed to achieve all of that. Again, a simple example. One could also propose an alternative. You know, if someone says, I want to buy that red car, but I can't pay over the 3 months, can't pay the lump sum, I can only pay 3 months. Then you can say, you know, with the red car, I don't think I can do that, but how about a blue one? Or you can compromise and say, you know what, I can't do 3 months, I can do 2. At a slightly lower interest rate than the 5%, to compromise, meet each other halfway. And then at the end of the day, it's all about establishing what each party's objectives are, you know, what are they aiming to achieve, and to exchange enough information in order to valuably gauge that. So very briefly, what are the types of collaborative contracts you can look at when you are looking at functions within your business outside of your ownership, outside of your board, outside of your employees? So the first one is obviously the independent contractor or freelancer arrangement. Now, it goes by many names, but essentially is mostly confused, or the most, one of the contracts most confused with employment, and wrongfully so. It is linked to a specific project or a space of time to perform a particular task, and once it's done, it's done. So think about a home renovation. You have a builder who brings in someone who can do tiling, who brings in someone that can do painting. They are there and working on this project for as long as the project lasts. Then there's no legal connection between the builder and the painter or the tiler, as the case may be. So Important that it's linked to something that is either a main agreement or a particular task for a specific space in time. Don't mix it with employment. Don't regulate the person's movement. They are not reportable to you exclusively, as would be the case with an employee. So leave days, sick days, benefits, these types of things, not applicable. Supplier, think of your stationery supplier, potentially even IT supplier. That's on an ad hoc basis, and well, it's really a commercial decision and a capacity decision if nothing else. And of course, a sensitivity of the data and information this person is going to be exposed to. From a sales point of view or an expansion point of view, agency is really good. Think of sales representatives that sell sometimes on a wholesale level, or medical equipment, for example, or even good old estate agents. So many forms it can take. The remuneration is based on outcome. So you need someone who's a good closer, not a door opener, not someone who has good interactions to get meetings. You need someone who can make a deal to be a really good fit in regards to this. Then, of course, a distributor, basically just a licensing agreement for someone to sell your products or services. Only big point here is make sure you don't do it on consignment, sell the goods, and then regulate the resale in terms of markups and qualities and that sort of thing. And then last but not least, the JV partnership, really good for expanding your reach, even expanding into a different market, and good for testing conceptually whether a merger can work. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The material I've shared with you along the lines of the skills around powerful negotiation, as well as ultimately implementing the results or the fruits of your negotiation in contract, are courtesy of Schoeman Law, Inc., where we proudly serve the legal needs of entrepreneurs and have been doing so since 2007. We do so and we help our clients grow and scale their business through the rendition of tailored, designed legal solutions in a wide range of disciplines, designed and sculpted towards the best needs and interests of the client, as well as the complexity of the issue concerned. We also offer contracts for biz, essentially expertly drafted contracts that are available online, which means we are utilizing technology in order to bring an affordable legal solution to the market without breaking the bank. We also support and maintain that product at Schoeman Law Inc., so you are assured of the highest quality. Last but not least, we help you through Pocket Advisor increase your skills, increase your strategic thinking, so that you are able to negotiate better contracts and to understand your rights and obligations in regards to all the relationships in your business. Ultimately, we produce graduates from our programs that are able to grow and scale their businesses because they are able to access funding and markets because we have produced legally compliant businesses. I invite you to go to our websites and to look at all the material, a lot of which is freely available at your leisure.